Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the British Library to one of our AI debates. I'm Emma Rich, I'm Director of Science and Innovation here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight. We run this series of AI debates on a regular basis, so do come back. Our next one is on AI and democracy on the 27th of March. So do come and join us again, and there will be more coming in due time. So just a few housekeeping things to let you know about. We don't have any fire alarms planned, so if you hear one, please make your way out the same way you came in. There's going to be bar open afterwards, so if you have the points of discussion that need some alcohol or some soft drinks or just space and time, you're welcome to hang around a little bit. And also, just to introduce our chair for tonight. So we are welcoming Timandra Harkness, who's going to introduce our panel. Timandra is a great friend that's been helping us with our debates now for a while. You probably heard her voice on Radio 4 on future-proofing and similar programs, and she has a great book that I'm going to plug called Technology is Not a Problem, which will give you one of the clues you need for tonight. One other note, we are recording, and we will put recording online, so if you don't want to be seen or heard, do grab one of us and let us know. Thank you. Timandra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maya. And yes, maybe with the speakers, you'd like to come up and I'll introduce you as you come onto the stage. So we actually have a panel of 4 this evening, but one of them is joining us by the wonders of technology from California, which is, I think, only right, really, given the subject matter. So we have a panel of 3 on stage, and Ed Newton-Rex will be dialing in imminently, I hope, from California. So, there he is, bang on cue. Welcome, Ed. What I will do is introduce the speakers in the order in which they're going to speak. They're going to speak for about 5 minutes each to start with, and then I will try and get a bit of argument going, basically, between them. I'm hoping things will be a little calmer than last time, which I thought was going to be a very quiet debate about libraries, and nearly got defenestrated by librarians, which is not a phrase I ever thought would be the end of my career. But obviously, we do want some lively civil debate. After we have a little discussion up here, I will come out to the audience in the room. And don't feel you have to try and shoehorn your point into a question. This is meant to be a debate, a discussion. We want to get as many people's thoughts as we can. So don't try and pretend it's a question. Just say what your opinion is, but also try and keep it concise and succinct. I will probably take 3 or 4 points at a time and then come back and let the panel pick and choose what they respond to. And obviously, they'll get the last word. And as Maya said, if you don't want to appear on a recording, if you pretended you were somewhere else and snuck off here, you have a word afterwards, or just say at the beginning, please edit me out, and then make your contribution. So let us go. So we're going to start off. I'm going to introduce you all and then let you go. So we're going to start with Tim Flagg, who's sitting here on my left, who is the Chief Executive Officer of UK AI. Founder of several AI businesses. All of them have biogs far too long to read out in full, by the way. I'm giving you the highlights. You can look them up online. He's had a 25-year career, worked for people like the BBC and Zipcar, founded 2 edtech businesses, co-founded Entity X, using AI to improve advertising targeting. You can have your own thoughts on that. And Intelliquence, which is a wonderful word, with the aim of widening access to AI, and is a non-executive director of Greater Than, using AI to predict and prevent road collisions and reduce CO2 usage. So all-round good guy. Matt Rogerson is Director of Global Public Policy and Platform Strategy at the Financial Times. So in this role, he oversees the Financial Times' global public affairs strategy. Previously, he was Director of Public Policy at the Guardian Media Group, and before that at Virgin Media. So I think we can see the general emerging theme here. Then we're going to hear from Caterina Moruzzi. Am I saying your name right? Good. Perfect. Who is a Chancellor's Fellow in Design Informatics at the University of Edinburgh. A Braid Research Fellow. That's B-R-A-I-D. That's not like... Anyway, Braid Research Fellow, leading a collaboration with Adobe to promote the responsible integration of AI tools into creative practices, and also lead of the research cluster Creativity, AI and the Human at the Edinburgh Futures Institute. And then we're going to hear from California, from Ed Newton-Rex, CEO of Fairly Trained, a non-profit founded in 2024 that certifies generative AI companies for fairer training data practices. In 2010, he founded Duke Deck, which is an AI music generation startup acquired by ByteDance. And then there he led the AI Music Lab and then led product for TikTok in Europe. And later, he led the audio team at Stability AI, where his team's product, Stable Audio, was named one of Time magazine's best inventions of the year in 2023. He's a visiting scholar at Stanford University and a composer of choral music. So don't say we don't give you Renaissance human beings here. So what a fantastic panel. So I'm going to shut up, and we're going to hear from each of them for about 5 minutes, and then I'll see if I can get a bit of an argument going without being thrown out of the window by angry librarians. Off you go, Tim. It's over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. UK AI, we represent AI businesses in the UK, and I think one of the first things I wanted to just make clear is that you'll hear a lot about AI, but actually that's a bit of a catch-all term, and there's many different types of businesses that work under that AI umbrella. So I think tonight in particular, when we're talking about the creative industries, we're talking a lot about generative AI companies, the ChatGPTs of this world. But really, there's thousands of other companies out there, and they range from small businesses who are using data science maybe, or maybe they're using machine learning. Maybe it's consultancy, maybe it's training. They're using different types of technologies in very different ways. So for me, I think one of the challenges when we start having these debates is that everybody automatically imagines that AI, this catch-all term, is all bad. And I want to help sort of unpack that, because the businesses who are members of UK AI, they do lots of different things. So that's the first point. Now, I think just to give you some of the context, some of you I know will be following this, but the government has announced there's an open consultation on changing the copyright laws. The copyright laws in the UK, we can get into more detail later, but they're actually very robust, and they have been very robust. The UK, England, has led in copyright laws for 300 years. And the sort of question is, well, why do they need to be changed? Whilst I'm not going to be defending the big Gen AI companies, let me try and explain what some of the arguments are there. They're saying that in order for them to make the next Gen AI model, they need to get a lot more data in. So I'm sure most of you will have used ChatGPT or one of the other LLMs. You're used to the idea of you type something in and you get an answer out. That's all based upon models that have been built. And billions and billions of tokens have gone into that. That's the input that goes in. And the companies that make those are saying, in order to make the next one, the faster one, the better one, and they're constantly bringing out these new models, in order to make the next one, they need more and more of this data. And that's why they're then saying, well, we need to get access to it. And some of that data is material which is copyrighted. So that's the argument that they would put for why they need to get access to the copyrighted data, and we'll get more of it. Now, I think the government has also been very much an advocate of AI, and they use this very sort of this broad catch-all term as well, but they're often talking about these big global tech companies, and they're saying that they want to support the AI sector. Fantastic. You know, we welcome the government's plan, the AI action plan that they put out a couple of weeks ago in January. But we're saying that we don't think it needs to be at the expense of the creative sectors. So what I'm hoping we'll get into today is try to find some solutions whereby actually we don't need to hurt the creative sectors. We don't need to get rid of those copyright laws, undermine the rights of creators and artists in order to allow the AI sector to grow. There are a number of ways we can get into doing that. We held an event last week where we brought all sides of the argument together. So we had some of the tech companies and we had some of the creative companies, creators, and we actively tried to find solutions. I think that needs to be done a lot more to get everybody around the table, because some of the non-Gen AI companies have the solutions to actually being able to empower creators to take control of their rights and to defend them and get monetized, get remunerated for those rights with the big Gen AI companies rather than it being the other way around, because there is very much a David and Goliath situation going on there. So I hope we're able to come back to some of those in the future, conscious of making sure I try and keep this under 5 minutes. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour of the context for this debate and where we sit as UK AI representing the businesses across the UK who are really calling for responsible and ethical AI. We want to help educate everybody, yourselves in this room, the wider public in the UK about how to use AI for good. And we want this industry to be successful, but we know the industry will only be successful if we can be responsible and ethical. And as consumers, you can all help by choosing the companies who are responsible and ethical as well. I'll leave it there, but thank you.
Great, thank you. Admirably pithy. Thank you, Tim. So, Matt, give us your 5 minutes on creativity and AI.
5 minutes. Some of you hopefully will know the Financial Times. It's been around for 135 years. Two quite strange things about the Financial Times in modern day Britain. First is it's a growing news media business, which is quite unusual. Second is that we pay our taxes in the UK, which is also quite unusual, because many businesses don't. So this week I had a really good moment where I realised the potential of AI to empower citizens and small businesses across the UK. I met somebody in the town where I live in Staffordshire who has been developing AI agents for many years. And he's been deploying them in public service settings for years, delivering great services for the public sector, and his business is nearly profitable, which is far more than you can say for many of the biggest generative AI companies that are coming out of the US. So there is the opportunity to use AI and generative AI models to empower people across the country. The other scenario, one which we're sort of seeing play out at the moment, is the idea that 3 or 4 very large US tech companies want to flood the zone in terms of AI models and AI products, trained using copyright material from creators based in the UK and elsewhere around the world. And that actually those smaller AI models don't get a look in. So there is an opportunity where you get kind of AI going through the economy, and you also get super informed citizens who get access to news and information in a way they've never had before. It's personalised, it knows what they're interested in, it knows about where they live and their communities. But in order to do that, you need the data to train those models. And in order to stay informed in kind of a live setting, you need live journalism and live data to feed those models so that they know what's going on in the world. Because an AI model has a cut-off date, and that cut-off date might be 2 years before today, it might be 3 years before today. If you ask an AI model a question about what's happened today and it hasn't got access to live journalism and live information, it's like a brick. It's completely useless. Or worse, and to the title of this session, it gets creative and lies to you as a user. So you need kind of to have that supply of high-quality information to train and to feed those models. And I think Tim's already flagged a bit. I think that's where we're really concerned as a business that invests in professional IP, that the government is taking an approach where it seems to be favouring the requests of very large US tech companies to water down the UK's copyright framework in a way which would mean that the onus is put on us as a business to track down who's stolen our content, rather than the other way around with UK copyright law as it is at the moment, which is that it's up to us to decide who we do a licensing deal with. It's up to us to decide whether we actually want to do a licensing agreement with an AI developer, because there may be situations where the product they're developing is entirely or partially substitutional for the commercial products that we sell. So that's at the core of the concerns. I think it feels like there's so much that happens in AI every day. It feels like the narrative is settled that this can only be won by, again, those companies that are spending or have pledged $500 billion for, Stargate in the US. I think the intervention of DeepSeek, which was built by folks who didn't have cloud storage to sell, who didn't have chips to sell, who were just innovating on the basis of building the best model in the most efficient way, that should give us hope as a country that actually we can build a model, we can build an AI businesses in the UK which can succeed in this race.
Excellent, thank you. Very optimistic. Thank you very much, Matt. Triumphing over technical difficulties. Caterina,
yes,
your 5 minutes-ish?
yeah, perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks to Tim and Matt because they already gave you the context, so I can go a little bit in more detail on some of the aspects of this debate. And these aspects will come from my background. So just to disclose my background, I have a PhD in philosophy, but I was trained as a classical pianist for many years. So I come from the humanities, the arts and humanities background, but now, as Timandra was saying, I'm working with Adobe to make sure that these tools are developed in a responsible way. So my points will cover philosophical and creative aspects of the debate. And starting with the creative industries, as part of my research, I work with a lot of creators and creative industries. And there is a lot of concern around this consultation. They already received 10,000 responses, which is unheard of for consultations, and they are expecting them to double. Because everyone that I know is responding, everyone wants to make their voice heard, which is great. But this concern actually can also have a paradoxical effect that can harm also the AI sector that instead this change in the copyright law is supposed to foster. And this is because there was, in the last years, a lot of movements for open data and open access, especially in the GLAM sector, so in the cultural heritage. So we have all these fantastic collections online available for everyone to consult. But the effect of this concern might be that, well, organizations might start actually to close down these collections because of the concerns that all this open data might be used for AI training. And this will, of course, harm us, but also harm the AI companies who might want to use this data. And the other paradoxical effect is that if creators who are the ones who provide the data that are essential for running these models in an effective way are concerned and stop making their creations available, then these models can degrade over time. This is called model collapse. Is a phenomenon by which when these generative AI models are trained on low-quality data and often data that has been generated by other AI models, the quality degrades over time. So I think that there is a way for the AI and the creative sector to work together for the benefit of both sides, but both sides need to talk to each other, as Tim was saying, and also to hear the concerns of the other side. If we find models of distributed content attribution and credit attribution that can benefit the creators and give the proper credit to them and the proper remuneration, this might benefit actually both sides. And I will close with a more philosophical aspect of the debate. So the copyright law, so what is wrong with the copyright law? Well, probably there's nothing wrong with the copyright law at the moment, but there is one thing that should be considered, is that the notion of author that we have, of authorship, is quite outdated, let's say. It's still based on the romantic idea of the individual artist, of someone who is working alone. And this doesn't really work when more than one actor is involved and contributes to a process of creativity. This is not new. It's not just with AI that this comes to the fore. If you think about the film industry, there are many people involved. But AI can give us an opportunity to rethink maybe more distributed ways of understanding what authorship is and making sure that each actor gets a fair credit and attribution. So this is where I would like to see this debate go in the coming months.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. I do love it when a speaker ends in a massive, wide, huge philosophical issue, just so that ensure that none of you sleeps tonight. So, Ed, you have well, I was going to say you have the last word of the panel, but you don't, because as soon as you've finished, I'm going to try and get an argument going between the four of you. But you have the last 5-minute presentation, so off you go. Feel free, obviously, to rope in points from other people's if if you need to respond.
Yeah. And thank you. And sorry not to be there in person, but thanks for dialing me in. Yeah, look, I'm a big believer in generative AI. I've been building these models since 2010, long before we called it generative AI. We called it creative AI at the time. I think the technology and the vision behind it are amazing. I honestly just think that stealing the work of the world's creators, and I do think it's stealing, is not amazing, and we can find a better way to do this. There are three key resources that generative AI companies need in order to build their models: people, compute, and data. So engineers to build the models, GPUs to run the training process, and data to train the models on. Now, data, of course, here is people's life's work we're talking about. AI companies spend huge amounts of money on the first two, sometimes $1 million per engineer, up to $1 billion per model. But most AI companies think they can take that third resource, training data, people's life's work, for free. And I think this is unfair and unsustainable. And the main reason I think it's unsustainable is that unlicensed training like this has massive negative consequences for the people behind the work that is trained on. And this is for the simple reason that generative AI competes with that work and competes with those people. I've been an AI company CEO. It's not the narrative that we AI CEOs like to portray, right? We like to talk about democratization. We like to talk about letting people be more creative. But the fact that generative AI competes with its training data is totally inescapable. Like, a large language model trained on short stories will be able to create competing short stories. An image model trained on stock photography will be able to create competing stock photography. Like a music model trained on music that's been licensed to TV shows will be able to create competing music to license to TV shows. It's inescapable. And it's not just theoretical either. While Gen AI as we know it now is still pretty new and we don't have large-scale studies on this, we're already starting to see precisely the sort of effects you'd expect to see in a world where generative AI does compete with its training data. You've got the filmmaker Ram Gopal Varma saying that going forward he'll use AI-generated music in all his projects. You've got reports already of people listening to AI music in place of human-produced music. You've got a song in Germany, an AI song reaching number 48 in the charts. An artist I know, Kelly McKernan, an artist from Nashville, for 10 years they sold enough of their work to make art their full-time income. And in 2022, when various AI image generators started training on their works, their income fell by 33% almost overnight. And there are stories like this from illustrators around the world. And we also have data on this now as well. The Harvard Business Review recently came out with a report showing that the introduction of ChatGPT led to a decrease in the availability of freelance coding jobs by 30%, writing jobs by 20%, and the introduction of image generators led to a decrease in the availability of image generation jobs, if you like, by 17%. So generative AI competes with its training data, and that is, I think, why licensing is so important. And we've got to remember that licensing is it's not a choice, right, between having AI models and having strong copyright law. You can have both, and the way to do that is licensing. There are already at least 30 major licensing deals that have been publicized between rights holders and AI companies. I can tell you there are loads more behind the scenes that no one knows about. There are other ways you can get training data, like using the 500 billion word public domain data set, common corpus that's available. That it is not impossible to license your data, and that's what we try to show with Fairly Trained and with the companies that we certify. And I'll maybe just finish by saying, it's not just rights holders who care about this. The public agrees. The biggest poll on this from the AI Policy Institute in April last year asked people what they thought about the common policy among AI companies of training on what they call publicly available data. That's like work that we've all put on the internet because we were told to for decades as exposure. 60% of people said that AI companies shouldn't be allowed to train on this versus 19% who said they should. And the poll then asked, should rights holders be paid? Should these creators be paid for this training? 74% said yes, and only 9% said no. And all the similar polls show the same thing, because honestly, it's common sense, right? Like, who is arguing the opposite except AI companies? So look, I don't think AI development should be halted. I don't think it shouldn't exist. I think Gen AI can be an amazing thing. and often is. I just think the resources that it uses should be paid for. It's people's life's work we're talking about. It should be paid for. It's as simple as that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ed. Okay, so we got some strong issues coming out already, and I'd like to throw out a couple of things and maybe throw out a couple of questions, and then hoping that you would like to respond to each other, because I think we've got some different positions emerging here. To you, Tim, you said something very interesting. You kind of called on us as the public to use more ethical AI companies, if I'm not oversimplifying what you said, that like to kind of use our influence as consumers to say, well, you're an unethical AI company, I don't like how you do your training, but you're ethical. And obviously, I mean, this is the kind of thing that Ed's certification system would enable people to do. But really, isn't this a lot to put it onto us, the general public, to say, I'm going to have to look into this silly product I've got on my phone that I'm having some fun with, making some fun images, or maybe, maybe I can use this for my work to create something to use in my work. Is it reasonable to expect us to go out and research companies? Is this not exactly the kind of thing that regulated capitalism is meant to do, in that governments are meant to go, yeah, well, we don't expect people to shop around and find the bread that's not poisonous. We actually set standards for this. We don't expect people to shop around and find the companies that don't employ slavery. We actually have laws about this. Is it reasonable to expect us, the consumers, to be doing that legwork?
I'm glad you've kind of asked me that question. I think we do, and I think consumers actually are very much more active now. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, things like the egg marketing campaign. Do you remember when the world went crazy about kind of eggs getting salmonella, and then suddenly everyone was kind of looking for what are the safe eggs? And then over the last kind of couple of decades, there's been a real focus on the welfare of animals, welfare of eggs, and how they're produced. There's been things like fair trade. So there's a lot of these certificates where I think consumers now are much more actively engaged in wanting to understand the companies that they're buying for. So I'm not saying that as an industry, we should give up responsibility and say, oh, it's nothing to do with us. I'm saying actively, we want to be engaged in this conversation, and we're saying that ultimately the consumers will be able to decide which are the companies who are doing the right thing and which are the companies who aren't doing the right thing, as they're already doing. Our role as a trade association is to bring the industry together with that focus, and then to work on a sort of a campaign to help nationally people understand what AI is. That point I made before, it's not just these Gen AI companies, they're a very small minority. There's all these other companies out there doing great things and using AI to transform lots of sectors. So education, that's part of it. And then really sort of helping set up those standards and championing things like the work that Ed's doing. That, there's a whole bunch of certifications out there which we as an industry want to bring together and make it easy for the consumers to be able to understand those certifications to make informed decisions. In our recommendation into the consultation, we're talking about empowering consumers to make informed decisions.
So what do you think about this, you other three panellists? Is this the way to go? It's like free-range eggs, but presumably we don't want free-range AI. We want the restricted or licensed-ranged AI. Is that going to be enough to...
So I mean, if you look at some of the cases that are coming out in the US, and just to be clear, a lot of tech lobbyists will say AI training is fair use in the US. It's not the case. There are 30 outstanding cases looking at whether AI training actually complies with fair use, which is a 4-step test. The one case that has been ruled on in the US, Thomson Reuters versus Ross AI, went in favour of the rights holder Thomson Reuters. So the law is not only not settled, it's going in the direction of the creators, not the AI companies.
Sorry to break your flow. Could you just tease out what that means, that case, in practice? Because, and again, sorry to interrupt your flow. People in the audience, who would say they're an AI professional or expert? Oh, don't be shy. Sorry, I should have gone with the more extrovert professions first. Okay, so two of you. Who would? All right, let's do this the other way. Who would say you're definitely not an AI professional or expert? Okay, quite a lot of people. Who would say you're a creative person who produces? Okay, right. So we'll escort you safely out the building at the end too. At least not me that's going to get defenestrated this time. Right. So. What I mean is just, I don't think we should assume a level of knowledge of how AI works and how the law works in the room. So please indulge me and just tease out exactly what is in this
Ed would be your legal expert on fair use and how it works.
Okay, but just tell us a little bit more about the Thomson Reuters case, because I remember that a few days ago.
As I understand it, Ross AI was a competitor to Thomson Reuters. They used content from Thomson Reuters to set up a competing service. So that was deemed not to be fair use because it didn't pass the 4-step test. So that has implications for other services, like there's a service called Perplexity, markets itself to consumers, and it literally says, skip the links. So don't go to the source website. We will provide you with a summary service of news and information, which you pay for, but none of that revenue is shared with the source website that they've scraped to use that content. So this is what's going to happen, I think, over the next few years. These services will emerge. And to the point about will people be good, use good licensed stuff, there's another interesting case, which is authors versus Meta. And in that case, you're seeing discovery. So discovery is where the claimants in that case get the power to extract documents from the defendant and find out what's gone on in terms of use of data in the creation of a model. And in that case, what you're seeing is that they had questions about whether it was legal to use a pirated set of copyright books from a Russian pirate site. I think it was hosted on Pirate Bay. And the decision was whether to use it or not. And one of the factors that went into the decision to use it was the fact that OpenAI was believed to have used it. So this is a race to the bottom at the moment. And unless you have kind of transparency and really clear rules, being clear, actually, that use of copyright material in this way is wrong, then that will keep happening.
Okay, so Ed, would you like to chip in and give us the more in-depth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I follow these cases pretty closely. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Matt. You know, I think that the Thomson Reuters case is really interesting. I mean, fair use is really interesting, right? Like, the US, like fair use, as Matt says, one of the ways that fair use decisions get made, fair use decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. So there's no blanket exception for generative AI training in the US. That's just total fiction. You know, these fair use cases get decided on a case-by-case basis. And one of the factors that affects the decision is what is the impact of the copying, and here copying happens during training. What is the impact of the copying on like the potential market for and value of the original work? And that is one of the main reasons why the case went against the AI company in the first of these cases that we've seen, because there was clear market impact. The judge said there's clear market impact. And I think what's striking about the UK's consultation, and one of the big misses in my mind, is that the UK government seems to be trying to go way further than even the US currently has, which is frankly this quite nuanced law where you make these decisions on a case-by-case basis, and you take into account things like how much is this going to compete with what it's training on. The UK, on the other hand, is just saying, no, you can have this broad exception. Generative AI training is fine. I mean, yeah, you respect opt-outs, and we can talk about the total unworkability of opt-outs, but basically what our government is proposing something that is just way more punitive to rights holders than is the case in the US, which is, I don't know if it's intentional, but it's kind of frankly shocking.
The substitution thing is, as well, is the same so Singapore is cited as being a place where AI training should be able to take place. They have a substitution clause in their exception saying that if the product you're creating is substitutional for the source material, that's a breach of copyright. The same is true in Japan, which is another country that's often cited. Section 34 of their copyright code in Japan says if it's substitutional, then that's a breach of copyright. So we're sort of being sold a fiction in the UK that other countries around the world are weakening their copyright regimes to allow AI training. It's just not true. Just not true.
Can I bring it back to your original question, Timandra, about the general public? So I just want to make a point. So I think it's all well and good to say we should give the choice to people, to the audience, to make informed decisions about the content that they're consuming and also the AI. But this informed decision, we cannot make this informed decision if there is no education, and at the moment there is no education at all. For consumers, there is no education for creators who are being asked, to go and seek ways to make your content non-trainable by AI. So how are we supposed to do that if we are not educated? So maybe the question is, who should educate the audience around how a piece of content was generated, why the AI was used? Because I don't think that the labels now for provenance usually say it's either AI generated or non-AI generated. And this dichotomous space is not enough for many. We've conducted some studies where people, even general public, were saying, well, tell me more. Tell me why was the AI used, because I might accept it if I know why. So I think there needs to be more nuance and more education for all stakeholders.
Can I come back on that?
Yes.
I 100% agree on the need for education, and I'm glad you sort of underlined it. In the government's AI action plan, which they launched last month, I think they missed an opportunity to really extend the remit for education. They focused very narrowly, and it's a good thing they focused on, having more developers. That's great. But actually, education is, to your point, it needs to be for everybody. And it's not just about learning how to code and program. It's the basic things. It's the basic AI literacy. It's being able to engage and know how to use those tools to ultimately have the confidence. Why are we saying this as a trade association? Well, because ultimately, these people who we want to help learn about the AI tools, they will be the consumers who will use our tools and products and services. So one of our main campaigns is putting pressure on the government to recognise the need for AI literacy, both earlier in schools, having better and broader education. And there's a number of things which we're calling on. But I don't want to go too much off topic, because I know I get very passionate about skills as well, but that is certainly something that I 100% agree on as well.
All right, well, there was something else I wanted to throw out, and this maybe will be an opportunity for all of you to develop some of this nuanced understanding. To play devil's advocate for a moment, obviously, the way that AI uses other people's work, to train and to generate new stuff is not the same as what humans do. But when you think about how music, for example, or how the visual arts, or how literature, or any of these things have developed, none of us create something in a vacuum. So all of us, in human ways, draw on the entire body of previous work. I mean, if Ed, you write choral music. You didn't wake up one day and go, I wonder what would happen if I brought some people together and they sang and maybe sang different notes at the same time. You're drawing on, a couple of thousand years of tradition and of other people's work and of other people looking at the work that came before them and listening to that and looking at it and changing it and introducing their own thing. And you could say the same about books. You could say the same about visual arts. All of us work within a tradition of previous work. We consume that, then we produce something original. Now, obviously, it's not the same when an AI does that. But if AI is another tool for creativity, in what ways is it different when an AI consumes the previous work of humans and then generates something that's new? And I say generates rather than creates because obviously there are humans that are programming the AI and selecting and training it, selecting which outputs they like and which they don't, and so on. So, I mean, all of you, but possibly more you three, tease out for me, explain to me what is different when AI does it, and what is different that needs particular regulation, or are you actually saying, you know what, the copyright laws work just fine to manage that relationship so that I can be inspired by other books, but I can't just lift chunks of them wholesale and put them into my books, and so on. Is it that the current copyright laws are just fine for that, or is there something different about AI and we need some different kind of laws?
Yeah, I'd be happy to kick off. I mean, yeah, the current copyright law in the UK is absolutely fine for this. Human learning is legal, and generative AI training on copyrighted work for commercial purposes is illegal. Whatever the government sort of says in at the moment when they respond to things, everyone agrees it's illegal at the moment. It's sort of incredible that the government is still peddling this idea that there's some issue around it. Look, I think we can set aside, like, obviously. Maybe not obviously, but machine learning is very different to human learning. Technically, AI involves data pre-processing, tokenization, minimizing a loss function. It uses model weights. You can optimize things by swapping in different models. There are hundreds of differences technically. But I think the more interesting question is kind of what you're getting at, which is, okay, but like sort of in the abstract, how are these things different? Why should they be treated differently? And this is the argument that I hear the most from people who try to defend unlicensed training. And I think it's a very hard claim to justify when people say these things are the same, they should be treated the same. So as a composer, right, when any of us create, we expect that other artists will learn from us, right? That's priced in. We learn from a range of sources, other art, textbooks, taking lessons. A lot of that we or someone pays for, supporting the entire ecosystem. It works very well. It has done for centuries. In generative AI, commercial entities valued at millions or billions of dollars scrape as much content as they can, often against our will, against creators' will, without any payment, making multiple copies along the way, which are subject to copyright law and is illegal in the UK, to create a highly scalable competitor to the work they're copying. And I think that scalability is key. There are image generators making an estimated 2.5 million images a day. There are song generators making 10 songs a second. So this is a very, very different premise. And that is why the law treats it differently. So in my view, arguing that human learning and AI training are the same and should be treating the same, it is an argument you hear a lot, but I think it's very hard to justify.
Okay, well, I'm just going to push this point a little, because the points that you make could have been said at various points in the past, like when music was first recorded. People started recording folk singers and making records and selling the records, or even people started writing down rhymes and songs and printing them in sheets and selling the printed sheets, selling printed music. Or the industrialization of creative products has been going a long time. And at every point there, some individual creators would have suffered and lost out, but without that, we wouldn't have the enormous creative resource that all of us have access to today. It would only have been, a few people who could afford to pay a composer and their own private string quartet who could listen to string quartets, instead of all of us being able to buy CDs, just show my age there, or log on to the internet. So again, just to push it a little, is there a difference of kind here, or is it that this is the latest stage in the kind of mechanization, the automation of creative product, and do we just need to find new ways of making sure that the losers don't lose too badly and the winners don't win too much at everybody else's expense?
I think it is a difference of kind, because all those things are based on consent and permission. Unlike recorded music, unlike the printing press, unlike the camera, unlike all of these previous technologies that AI boosters continually sort of will bring up and say, and this again, it's a good devil's advocate position, right? Because it's one that is brought up by a huge number of people. But all of these technologies are based on permission, every single one. Generative AI, at least, and I want to clarify, and I agree with Tim here. Not all AI, and not even all generative AI. There are companies, and I know many of them, right, who are licensing all their training data, who are paying, right, who are taking the ethical approach. So I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, but that is why this is so different. People's work is being exploited against their will at scale commercially to create highly scalable competitors. It's never happened before. Or, well, let's be clear, it has happened before at least once in the Napster era, and we all know how that ended. It was judged to be illegal.
Would you like to, sorry, did you want to chip in on that? I was just thinking of your distributed authorship model and whether that was going to muddy the waters in some constructive way.
Yes, yeah, well, I think I agree that there is a difference in kind, but the difference in kind that I see is in the concept, in the nature of creativity itself. So if we go back to the theory of creativity, creativity is the ability to create something that is novel, original, surprising, but also that is a product of agency. I know we are talking a lot about AI agents at the moment. It seems to be the buzzword of 2025. But AI still doesn't have the agency that humans have. And I'll just, in relation to creativity, I'll just make you an example. So let's say that you are a painter. And at one point, you judge that your painting is ready. So basically, you decide when to stop. And it's you who decides when to stop. You look at it and say, okay, that's what I wanted to achieve. And AI doesn't do that. And I think that's, for me, is the key difference in kind between how humans create and how AI creates. So it's this lack of evaluation. I'm not excluding that it might be able to do that in the future, but at the moment, that's what distinguishes humans from AI, and that's why I don't think that AI can be considered an author and thus having copyright attribution.
Now, I know you want to say more, but I feel I've been hogging the panel here. So I am going to come out to the audience. So we should have about half an hour for you to give your thoughts. We have a roving microphone somewhere. So if you'd like to speak, stick your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. Oh, there we go. We've got 3 down the front. This is inevitable because the microphone's at the back. Obviously, it's the law. We've got 4 down the front. So there we go. So if you'd like to go to that person in the lilac top with the headphones. It was dark. I couldn't see it. It looks delightful, whatever it is. It's got fringes. It's marvellous. Do we have more than one? Would you like to bring that one to this person at the end and then we'll work along? Because I did see you. Okay, that end, fine. Yes, that person. Okay, but you go because you've got the phone.
Thank you, guys. It's been amazing so far. Quick question. So I am not a lawyer. I'm a creative. But as far as I understand IP and copyright laws, the moment an artwork or a design or something gets changed up to 10%, well, 10% or more, then it becomes law deems it as new and genuine. So if generative AI is actually pulling from different people, okay, I acknowledge, against there is no consent, permission, etc. But then it's creating genuine work, no? Yes, I wonder what would be your opinion and take on that from the legal standpoint of view as well.
Great question. Hold this thought. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 4 and then come back and let you 4 respond and then go out again. So yes, if you got the microphone, yes, you'd like to take you to, and then actually if you'd like to get that microphone to this chap at the end, ready for one. Yeah, off you go.
Hi, thank you. It's been very enlightening at the moment. One thing we haven't covered at all is biases within AI data sets. And I wonder what your opinion is on licensed versus unlicensed. Is using licensed data sets going to introduce more biases because you're using a subset of data from a particular source? And how could that potentially affect things long term? Thank you.
What a great question. Did the person next to you also want to? So if you go and then we'll come to you at the end. Yeah.
Speaking from a real position of ignorance here, I didn't quite understand what Ed was saying about what was appalling that the British government was doing.
Okay, great. We'll get him to clarify.
And could that be clarified,
yes.
please?
Yes, this is always a problem when we get people on stage and we're a bit obsessed with this stuff and then we'd run on ahead. So apologies for that. We'll get Ed to come back and clarify. So if you'd like to make your point of question and then I'll come back to the panel. Go on.
Yes, I have a question sort of around authorship and AI and creativity. Back during COVID, back when GPT-3, I think, was the most recent version, I knew someone who had, one of the few people who had access to it. And one of the things that we did was we would occasionally create GPTs and say, train them on the entire works of Shakespeare. Everything that Shakespeare had ever written was fed into this model. And if I then collaborate with that model and create a play, who is the author? of that work? Is it me? Is it me in collaboration with William Shakespeare? Is it me in collaboration with GPT-4 whatever and William Shakespeare? Like, because you can do that. You can get a GPT and you can train it on the entire works of an artist that is in the public domain. So I could collaborate with Jane Austen. I could collaborate with Charles Dickens or Shakespeare or all three of them. Who owns that?
Okay,
And
excellent.
Who gets paid?
Excellent question. And actually, supplementary to that, I remember some time ago doing a radio program about the future of art and interviewing an artist called Mimo Acton, who was really interesting, who his artworks were programs which were trained on precisely out of copyright authors, and it's enabled the person experiencing the artwork, if you like. What they were doing was interacting with the program to create things. And he said, no, the artwork is the program. Then by interacting with it, you get from it what you get from it. So and that raised a similar kind of question. So please don't answer all the points, but please between you answer all the points. Who'd like to kick off? Ed, would you like to start by clarifying the thing that you said the UK was doing that was so appalling?
Sure, absolutely. Sorry. Yes. So the UK government's proposal is to create a new broad exception to copyright that will allow commercial generative AI training on copyrighted work, on people's life's work that is copyrighted, with allowing rights holders an opt-out. So that means that people can opt out of this arrangement. I think this is a very bad proposal for several reasons. The main two reasons I'd give, and there are many more, being firstly, as I've already said, generative AI competes with what it's trained on. And so by giving a broad exception in this way, you are essentially throwing the creative industries and creators under the bus in order to favor AI companies. Secondly, getting into the specifics, the opt-out that the government proposes is not only very unfair to people because it shifts the burden onto them, onto rights holders. And what you find every time I've run these opt-out schemes, despite about 90% of rights holders objecting to AI companies using their works, you find that only about 10% of people opt out. And the reason for that is because they don't realize they can opt out or know how to opt out, for obvious reasons. There's a reason organ donation is opt-out in the UK. It's because ultimately we want people to donate their organs. You have something be opt-out if you basically want to get as much of it as possible. But more importantly than that, it's impossible to opt out your works from generative AI training. There is no way of actually doing it. As an example of this, I'm a composer. My sheet music is published. Choirs buy that sheet music. They record it. They broadcast it on the radio. I have no control over that broadcast at all. I cannot opt it out of training. And there are a million examples like that, because that's what the creative industries are built on. They're built on legal licensing, legal copies that you then lose control of. You then can't opt out. So I hope that's a kind of whistle-stop tour, but I think their approach would be disastrous for the creative industries.
Did that clarify what you were asking about?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Good.
That was my understanding already.
Okay.
That it was a disaster for the creative industries.
Yes, good. I was just checking that had clarified the thing we wanted to clarify. Good. Excellent. So thank you for that. So between you, I'd like you all to clear up whether if AI changes something by more than 10%, is that not creating something new? Who is the author if you work with a GPT trained on Shakespeare? And very, very important, interesting question. Could licensing make biases in AI either better or worse? Do you want to pick up on any of those?
Yeah, can I have a go at the first one about that secondary copyright issue? I think it's really interesting that there's two levels here. So we've been talking very much about the sort of foundational level of who owns the rights that go into the generative AI, and then now we're talking about the secondary question about once something comes out of that generative AI model, then who owns that copyright? So it is an interesting question, but the reason I position it like that is I think it's secondary to that fundamental question, and right now we need to solve that before we can get on to that secondary question. Frankly, I think it would be a better use of time to be focusing on trying to solve that rather than trying to unpick what we've already got. But in terms of how it works within the models now, I think there's this notion of attribution. That's one of the key challenges that we talk about a lot. So within the model, if you imagine sometimes there's billions of different points of data, tokens which are going into those training sets, they're used in their entirety. And it's sometimes very hard to understand then which particular image or piece of writing or piece of music has actually gone into the model and then comes out to be able to attribute it back. Now, I'm saying it's hard. Some people would say it's impossible. Some people actually would say, well, there's an AI for that. You can actually go and use some technology to help with that whole attribution process. The challenge, and it is a challenge, is that those models are increasing in complexity all the time. So it's going to have to be something which we're going to have to keep up with. But I think it is achievable, but that's a whole kind of challenge of attribution. And you have to sort of figure that one out first. I think also fundamental is transparency. You know, I think it's great everyone's come here and we're talking about all these concepts and ideas and how these things work. A lot of the time, though, it seems like a black box. A lot of what's happening inside of the Gen AI models is shrouded in secrecy. So I think we need to have those two things. We need to have transparency, and then we need to find these technological solutions to have attribution. And only then can we start having the question around who owns the secondary copyright as well.
Matt, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage that you'd need to make it significant, but the US Copyright Office has just published some guidance on when is a work copyrightable or not copyrightable, and it has to be a substantial proportion of the work that is human-made. So I think that means a simple prompt to a model wouldn't be sufficient to make it copyrightable under US law. That's certainly the guidance at the moment. Just on the biases, I think it really does, Tim's already said it, transparency is key on this, and it's both in terms of the training data that's used to train the model, also the data that's fed in live to ground the model in real time. But also with AI models, there's like a policy engine sitting at the back, which tells the model how to function and what to prioritize and what route to go through the data. And you might have seen Grok, which is the X model, that has very specific views about both Elon Musk and the mainstream press, and that's because there's a policy engine sitting behind it, which tells it what to say. And I think if you think about, you know, if we are heading to a world where 3, 4, 5 companies own large language models that then govern how we get news and information and how we get information more broadly, the idea that a national government wouldn't have any sense of what the policy engine was sitting behind that in terms of what it prioritized, what the views were of that model, it seems like fantasy. You know, we need to get a grip of that sort of like sense of prioritization within the model.
Great, thank you.
Yes, so maybe linking together the first and the last question, because I think they are somehow related. So actually in January 2024, there was the first case of, in the US of attributing copyright to an AI-generated image by a Gen AI platform that is called Invoke. And basically through this platform allows for much more customization on the side of creators. So they were able to show how each part of this image, which I think was called a single piece of American cheese, something like that, was generated through like the actual intent and contribution of a human creator. So that's how they managed to attribute copyright to that image. But can I just make a provocation that legal people in the room, I don't know if there are any, will scream at me, but the current copyright system is based on the product for obvious reasons, because that's what's tangible. But what if we shift the focus to the process instead? Can it maybe solve some of these issues of, like, as you were saying, maybe collaborating with an AI tool, but also collaborating with an author in the past? Is it possible maybe to distinguish what was the contribution in the process of each one of these actors? And that's where my distributed authorship concept comes from. So the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity that was founded by Adobe and other companies. And that's now a standard that is being used, and we use that as part of our research at the Center for Decentralized Digital Economy. It allows to track what your contribution was in a process. So maybe there's something there to explore. It will be a nightmare for lawyers, but yeah, I don't know.
Just for a moment there, I got excited and thought, if you could copyright process, then I could copyright procrastination. And then I need never work again. I'll just be charging every author everywhere. Go on.
Could I just quickly come back on the point about diversity as well? I think that's really, really important. And actually, there's a number of different levels that this is a problem in the AI sector. We have to call it out, I think. A lot of you will know there's not as much female representation in the tech industry broadly. It's even worse in the AI sector. I think it's something like 40% in tech and 20% in the AI sector. So I think the first step is we just need to take ownership of that and say, there's something we need to address. So as an industry trade association, that's something which we are doing. It's one of our main campaigns over the next couple of months, is looking at female representation, first of all, coming up around International Women's Day next month, but also then looking at the issues of race and diversity and inclusion more broadly, because I'm sure some of you will recognise that when those systems, the models we've been talking about, are programmed by people from a certain race or ethnic background, then they might not recognise some of the problems that come out when those models have been run and the results are seen. So by bringing in a more diverse set of people into the industry, they will understand and flag and see things which might not be obvious the first time around. It is important because we've been talking, for the last 40 minutes about how powerful and influential these models are going to be to society and to the economy. So it's really important we get that right at the beginning.
Okay, good. So we've got time for another round of points from the floor, so get your hands up. Okay, so green cardigan. I'm very worried about saying this after the unpleasantness with the librarians last time. And the hand down here. If we get the next microphone to that person there, and then we're ready to go when green, and then we'll come to you. Yeah, okay, off you go.
Hi, thank you. That was excellent. I work for one of the world's largest advertising holding companies. It's a funny industry where creative is a job title and the job is stealing ideas. I've spent the last few months building a creative AI. And one of the things I was really curious about coming to this talk was friend or foe to whom, because the AI that I built, we've recently been pitching for some of the world's biggest brands, and we slipped in some of the ideas that the AI had come up with, and it beat all of the human creatives. So not knowing, the creative director didn't know that they were AI ideas, but they were better ideas, which is why they got picked.
Friend or foe to whom? That's a great question, and one we can return to definitely at the end. Actually, if you'd like to put that microphone to that person in the row before, but meanwhile, somebody over here has the microphone. Off you go.
Hello. Yes, I'd like to talk about the original premise of this talk, which is creativity and AI, friend or foe. And I'd like to make an argument that it's foe. And if we look at the music, for example, how it went through history from early Christian or music to Baroque and classical, and then in later times to jazz and what have you, hip-hop, punk, etc. My first question would be, I'd like the panel to answer, which new one has AI created? And I imagine there are probably none. Now, that's fine, but what that worries me about, why I worry about that, is that if it hasn't created any new genres of music, and I believe it cannot, given that it's relying on what's already done and hasn't got the, can we say, imagination to create something new, then isn't that going to suppress creativity in the people in the existing genres of, say, hip-hop or pop or whatever, to push the boundaries. Because if they're flooded by, I think an earlier speaker said, oh, we can produce 10, I may be wrong, 10 pop songs a second or something. Well, imagine that increasing, and it's 1,000 songs per second, then there is literally no chance of someone in creating pop music to then move out of that into something different, because the market is flooded. So does it not stop creativity?
That's very eloquent, and I think the question of genres, I think, is a really interesting one. So I'd love it if somebody would pick that up, because, as you say, to create something within a genre is very different from actually busting a genre and coming up with a new genre. So somebody there has the microphone. Off you go. If anyone else wants to speak, stick your hand up now. Do not put it off any longer. Off you go.
This is obviously a very fascinating talk, and it's incredibly complicated. So I wanted to go back to what was discussed at the beginning about consumer choice, because I don't think it is, obviously it's not comparable to, like, you know, free-range eggs, but that actually has a direct impact on individuals in terms of, if I eat that egg, I personally am going to be sick. Whereas you've got something with AI, a lot of people don't understand what on earth it is, how it works. Now, I work in the creative industry, so I understand the impact of all of this. But if you just think about the normal person on the street, and you're asking them, okay, you need to choose which AI platform to use. You need to make sure the AI platform you use is, ethical. Are they going to actually be like, okay, yes, I must, when I look at my phone, I must choose that? And I think we do need governance on it. I don't think the government are doing great. I mean, I agree that the way the government are going on it is not great. But I think putting it back into the hands of the consumer and giving that responsibility to the consumer. I already have loads of things as well that I have to make choices on, that I am like, oh, I need to make sure I recycle this, and I need to make sure I do that, and I need, I've got 3 kids, and I've got a job. And I think when you've got something like AI, I do need guidance, I do need education, I do need someone to tell me or to put the laws in place, rather than me thinking, okay, I need to now go and have a look at which platforms I should be using because which one's ethical. I think that it's too early to be putting that back on all of us. I think that, and obviously I know that someone has to make the decisions, which is why you guys are all up there and you are very well versed in this. But I just think putting it back on the individual is too much responsibility, and I don't know how we would manage that and how we'd factor that into our daily lives.
Brilliant. Again, very eloquent. Thank you. So, okay, yes, let's put the microphone there. And anybody else, is it absolutely your last chance? Stick your hand up now. Okay, so there you go, down there. Off you go. Yeah.
Just to focus in on the topic of scale here, for generative AI, we've talked about it generating at scale. And therefore, to pick up and expand on the topic of flooding the market, then what room is left for the individual or smaller group of individuals to create their work, and where we already live in a society where to gain someone's attention is really difficult. All of our attention is being grabbed by many things. So if we live in a world of generative AI that is flooding the market, and our attention is always, at the moment, spread thin, does that not mean that the ability for the individual or a small group of individuals for us to see their work becomes even more reduced?
Very good point. Well made. Thank you. So you have the final word from the audience. No pressure.
I know we talked a lot about creatives that, like the obvious creatives, the ones that see the blank page, the painters, the musicians, or the writers. I was just wondering about those who support the creatives and how their industries are going. I come from post-production, film and television, so that's the colorists, sound engineers, VFX artists. And I'm just curious if there's any protection in place for the industries that support and enhance a creative project, or if that's just going the way of self-checkout, where it's going to be a bygone era.
Excellent point. Well made. Thank you very much. So, well done, audience. You've brought a really high standard of points and questions to the table here. So we have You've got about 3 minutes each, panel, to answer, between you, answer all those excellent points and sum up your own thoughts, after which you will give a rousing round of applause to the panellists, and then we'll all go out to the bar and carry on the discussion informally, which, as we all know, is where the real meat happens. So I think I'm going to take you in the reverse order of what I started with, so you will at least get the last word, Tim. So I'm going to start with you, Ed, and then go Caterina, Matt. That's right, isn't it? So about 3 minutes each would be perfect. Off you go.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to answer 4 of the questions, and I'm going to be really cheeky. I'm going to go back to a previous question first. I really want to say something about bias. I think this is a really important point. Models can be biased. I think the thing that I come back to, and the reason this is important is because actually AI companies use this as an argument for saying, so we need all the data without paying, because we want to get around bias. And to that, which isn't quite what you're saying, but to that I say, trying to minimize bias cannot be a defense for exploitation. If you are worried about bias, be it a model being biased against certain groups, the answer to that is not to go and steal their works and put them in the model. You're just perpetuating another crime in order to solve bias, and that's not the solution. The solution is to go and pay them, to negotiate with them. If you think someone's works aren't being displayed in enough art galleries, you don't steal the works to put them in an art gallery. And I think that's really important to remember. I also want to talk about new genres, which is a really interesting point. I would say have caution here. Back in 2010, I tell you, there were a lot of people who told me that AI would never be able to write music, and they were wrong. And I strongly think that AI will come up with new genres. There is no fundamental reason that it won't. I think that so I think it's important for us to not accept that, but to bear that in mind. I think that as regards consumer choice, I wanted to say a quick word on that. I totally agree. I think it's not enough. We have to have strong regulation here. Frankly, training these models in this way at the moment is illegal in the UK. There's a big question mark over whether the government are doing enough to enforce that. We need enforcement of existing regulation. And finally, that last point is great about, what is the impact on these industries that support creativity. And again, I think it's important for us to be pretty mindful of the fact that, these industries might be affected even worse than some of the ones we've spoken about. Ultimately, the impact of the government's planned legislation would be far greater on, people who aren't household names. Household names will largely be okay. Ultimately, people are still going to want to listen to, the Ed Sheerans of the world. But it's the non-household names, and that's both the creators themselves, who are not well known yet, and the people who work in all of those supporting industries whose names roll in the credits, and they're the ones who will be the most harmed by the government's plans. I think that's really important to remember. Anyway, thank you for, it's been great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. We can hold the applause and we'll do all the applause together at the end. The rest of you, the only 2 things that I'd like somebody to pick up are the idea that one thing you compete for is attention, and that if the market is flooded just at scale, then that becomes a real problem. And also the deep question, friend or foe, to whom? So, Caterina, if you could tackle either of those, that would be great.
Yes. So, yeah, I will just start by quickly about the post-production. We can talk about it later because there is a new project. It's called CoStar that is all across the UK that is going to look at that. So, yeah, we can talk later, so I won't take the time for this. Yeah, so friend or foe, actually, we did part of the project that I have in collaboration with Adobe was the marketing, with the marketing and advertising sector precisely, and also between the people, the participants to the study, there were someone who benefits a lot from using AI just because they are able to present to the client something that is better quality and sooner in the process, and others who instead were really struggling just by using it. So I think it comes down to a question that we may need to ask ourselves, and is a question of why using AI. I think now there is this FOMO around all of us. Well, it's something out there, I should be using it. Well, not necessarily. I mean, should be asking why can it really benefit my job, and if so, in what sense? So maybe, yes, not feeling that you need to use it at all costs, but only if it can be a friend to you. But yeah, it's a much deeper question, but don't have much time. And well, I'll probably leave the other question to someone else, because I wanted to say a quick thing about the genre. I think that for a genre to emerge, it takes time, and it also takes acknowledgement in some sense. So like, I was at Tate Modern today because I came down from Edinburgh this morning and said, well, why not going to Tate? And there were a lot of people there who were not acknowledged when starting a new genre, a new movement. So the question is, who are the judges who can judge when a new genre is emerging? And maybe we are not in the position now of saying whether AI is going to do that or not, just because it's a very dichotomous space now. Some people encourage to jump on the AI bandwagon because it's something that is there, and if we don't use it, we might be left behind. And on the other side, there are people instead urge resistance against it. So I feel that it's still too passionate a field, and this is my closing remark. I would like to see more nuance, because I think it's in the nuance that the future of AI creativity will lie. And maybe we will acknowledge some new genre as well. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much.
So, just to pick up on 3 points. On the creative AI point, I mean, I think you probably want creative AI when it comes to marketing. You probably don't want it when it comes to news, because that's sort of the last thing that you want. And that's the sort of challenge for a news organisation that bases its brand on reliable, accurate information, is that you get AI tools taking information and regurgitating it in ways which are inaccurate and false. And that has massive implications for the quality of information that we all live our lives by and make decisions by. So that's why I think the news sector is so concerned about people taking our content, using our brand without our permission, because the AI is too creative and not reliable enough. Second point is like how do humans stand out? And I think you're already seeing like the open internet is changing. It's full of slop, and actually the value that people will place on human-created content will increase over time, I think. The question is, how do we promote that as human-based originators of things like news and creativity? And I think as creative, we're part of a coalition of creative businesses that are fighting back against this consultation. And we're thinking about how we can collaborate in a whole range of ways and think about promoting the value of the human at the heart of what we do. I think the last point is just on consumer choice. And again, I would reiterate, it's unfair to put that choice onto consumers. And government has to take a lead. And it has to take a lead through regulation, but also as a procurer. So the government spends millions and millions of pounds every year on technologies, and that includes AI technologies. So they've just rolled out a big 5-year contract with a large US technology company for AI across government. And they did that after those large technology companies walked away from discussions about how to, with the Intellectual Property Office in the UK, those companies walked away from those discussions and said it's all fair use, we're not going to negotiate. So for me, that was the wrong signal to send, which was we're going to reward you with a big public sector contract despite the fact you walked away from those discussions.
Thank you very much. They are. Tim, you get the last word. So if you'd like to answer the friend or foe to whom question, and anything else you like, and also give us your closing thoughts.
Great, well, thank you. Some great questions. So, I mean, I think there's an opportunity here to look at how AI, Gen AI, is a tool that can augment humans. And so, we're talking about it as a bit of a threat, as a foe, but actually there is a big opportunity to level up the things we've been doing. And that's what we're going to see over the next few years. That's the inevitable reality. And what I think is really exciting is about where that takes us. So what the next type of visual art is, what the next type of music genre is. And I'm not saying that it needs to be completely removed from the human. I agree with some of the points already made, that I think it needs to be built upon what the humans can do. The human needs to be the ultimate purveyor of what art is. And that then gets into the philosophical question, which we don't have time, but maybe we can discuss in the bar, of can a machine make art? At the moment, I don't think a machine can make art, because I think there is something deeper, sublime about art that is part of the human condition that a machine can't make. But we're talking about machines being able to have things like advanced general intelligence in a couple of years. So it's very hard to be able to say with any certainty that that won't happen in the future. But like I say, that's a deeper philosophical point for maybe another discussion in the future. I think there's, on the point about regulation and education, I want to make sure that I'm not being taken to say that there shouldn't be any regulation. My point is more that I'm focusing, our trade industry is focusing on how can we educate people so they can understand and make informed decisions. But of course, there should be regulation. You know, we need to have laws in this country. But the challenge with regulation is you just can't spin up a new law like that. It takes a long process to go through. It's often very controversial. And the difficulty with laws that govern technologies like AI is that because it is changing and emerging and developing so quickly, it's very hard to capture that in a law that isn't defunct by the time 12 months, 18 months later that it's made its way through the legislative process. That's not to say don't try, but it's just saying there's some inbuilt difficulties in that. So I think a combination of those two, some regulation, but also we're focusing on the education part. I think just in terms of, I'll close with the idea that I think I challenge all of you to try and look at how you can use some Gen AI tools today. If you haven't already, I know lots of you have already. If you haven't, just try and use it. Just test it out. That's the only way that we as a society are going to be able to learn, is by getting stuck in and figuring it out. And then that informs us to have more of these discussions where we can all we will all be stakeholders. Thank you.
Well, before I get you to thank the panel, thank all of you. You've been a great audience, contributed some really great points. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for staying till the end. And both people in the room and people on YouTube, come back for the next in the AI debate series, which is going to be about AI and democracy. If you thought this one was not contentious enough, I think we're going to have some really good arguments in that one. And please, if you're in the room, you can't on YouTube, but if you're in the room, come and join us in the bar and carry on the informal discussion. We've got at least half an hour, I think, in the bar. Do come back on March the 20th for the... Is that... 27th. Oh, there you go, March 27th, Democracy and AI, Who Decides? And please thank our panel of 4 for being absolutely fantastic.